Hello, everybody. I'm just waiting for a few more people to join. We'll give it a minute or two and then we'll get started. But thank you so much for being here. It's gonna wait one more minute because I see quite a few people still signing on. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. MVP team, can you confirm that you can still see my slides? Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. My name's Kara Runston. If you don't know me already, I use she, her pronouns, and I am the MVP Grant Program Director. I'm joined here by a lot of my colleagues. Probably you already know and love them, but the multiple regional coordinators that are stationed around the state that work with all of our communities on their grants as well as some of our grant administration staff, and then also our wonderful consultant, Holly Jacobson, who has helped us kind of develop the MVP 2.0 program from the beginning and is helping us sort of revise it from the or the pilot process and roll it out in this next round. So that is who's on the call today. So in terms of an agenda for the first 30 minutes or so, I will be talking. So I'm sorry in advance for you hearing my voice for 30 minutes, but I'm going to give a bit of an overview of the MVP Planning 2.0 process, including some of the learnings that we've had from the pilot round that we've been undergoing for the past year and a half or so with about 30 communities. And so, yeah, I'll be talking about how that's been going and some of the changes that we're going to make for the first formal process that will be opening for applications in early November of this year. And then I'm also going to talk about some administrative details about this particular application round. Some of you may have gotten an email from your friendly regional coordinator telling you that you are required to participate in MVP 2.0 this round in order to continue to be eligible for action grants. So I just want to talk a little bit more about that so that you know more details about that application process. And then for the last half of the webinar or so, we'll take Q&A from any of you who are attending. So if you have a question, just go ahead and pop it in the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your webinar screen. And we might answer, if there is an easy one that the RCs could just answer, they might answer it just right in there. And if not, one of them or Marissa will read it out to me at the end of the session and we'll get that answered for you. If for some reason we don't get to your question, just reach out to us and we'll be happy to follow up with you on the answer to that question. Oh, and I also wanted to mention that the webinar is being recorded. We want to make sure that anyone who's not able to come today is able to access it and learn more about the program. So we are here today to talk about MVP Planning 2.0, and some of you may have the question of what is this? So MVP 2.0 continues to support Massachusetts communities in increasing resilience to climate change by building off of and filling gaps from the MVP 1.0 or the original planning grant process that 349 of our 351 municipalities have already gone through. And 2.0 in particular focuses on revisiting local priorities through an equitable and inclusive process and building out and implementing those priorities. So in MVP 2.0, it's a prescribed process. You'll get a process guide that walks you through all of the steps. And you'll hire a vendor, and you'll also get paired with a new person that we're calling an equity partner that I'll talk about a little bit later, who will help the municipality or the eligible entity go through the process. So in 2.0, you'll convene a community team to do equitable climate resilience work. You will learn some things through some trainings on strategies for building resilience, equity, and climate justice. You'll be revisiting your resilience priorities with the involvement of the wider community. And then you will get $50,000 of guaranteed funding for a seed project in your community to basically implement one of those priorities that comes out of the first year planning process part of MVP 2.0. And then you will also be kind of undergoing a process that can be replicated for future action grants. We're really trying to set folks up for success in the action grant program and walk you through basically what types of things are competitive for that program and set you up there. So eligible entities for MVP 2.0 include our municipalities, our MVP eligible tribes, and political subdivisions, for example, RPAs that are applying on behalf of a municipality or a group of municipalities. And we heavily encourage regional applications. I'll show a map a little bit later of some of the communities that are required to undergo 2.0 this round. And if you see some of your neighbors there, we'd be happy to help network and set up a regional application for you. So how is MVP 2.0 different than the original planning grant or MVP 1.0? So first of all, it's not a traditional planning process. The end of MVP 2.0 is not a plan. That was something we heard kind of resoundingly from all of our investigation into what folks were looking forward to in an update process for the planning grant. So basically, you fill out a bunch of worksheets and do a lot of different engagement with your community. And the end sort of major deliverable of the MVP 2.0 process, besides the seed project, is just a list of the resilience priorities that your community would like to undertake. So no need to be writing a 300-page plan to turn in to us. It also expands community involvement. I'll go over that in some of the steps to the 2.0 process in a little bit. It dives deeper into social resilience. So you can think about that in terms of like the community connections that help people kind of weather a storm together, and also kind of highlighting who the populations are who are most vulnerable to climate change and really elevating those voices in the planning process. And then we are focusing on translating priorities into action. So we're through the seed project really trying to not just have a plan, but also how do we implement that. And 2.0 helps you kind of train a community team with community members that are community liaisons. I'll talk a little bit more about the definition of that, but if you ever feel like you're the only one in town that's doing your climate resilience work, we're really trying to build you a team that you can implement your climate resilience goals with, and that you can turn to as you need to apply for an action grant, for example, or do another project in town. So just trying to get more support for all of these important actions. Other benefits of MVP 2.0, it's designed to make it easier for you to apply to action grants. Some of our different frameworks and guides are really there to help you flesh out an idea that would be competitive for an action grant process. And your RC will also help you with your seed project and implementing that, which I think will be a good learning opportunity for some action grants as well. The data and information collected through 2.0 will be applicable for other grant programs. You've probably noticed a lot of federal grants, for example, have more different like equity considerations and things. And so we're really trying to set folks up for success with all different types of grant programs through our focus on that in MVP 2.0. The process supports municipalities in developing relationships to expand and broaden the people involved in government decision-making, and it supports municipalities in piloting a process for equity-focused community engagement. So I wanted to talk a bit now about the pilot process and some of the feedback that we have heard over the past year and a half when that program was launched. It was launched on Earth Day in 2023 by Governor Healy, and then we awarded about 30 communities grants to help us kind of implement MVP 2.0 for the first time and gather feedback. So we really appreciate if any of our pilot communities are on the call or their vendors or anything like that. Thank you so much for all of your help in kind of rolling this out and seeing what works and what doesn't work. I should note that I'm going to be presenting on the webinar today what the revised process is based on the feedback from the pilot communities that we've now integrated into the process. What I'm presenting is not going to be the same as what's on the website because we're kind of currently actively changing the different materials, but all of those should be updated by the beginning of next year, which is when we anticipate the next round of 2.0 starting. So just wanted to kind of preface that before we dive in. So we got targeted feedback on our pilot program from 4 rounds of MVP 2.0 cohort meetings where all of the different folks working on these planning processes came together in each region to kind of share lessons learned and talk through some of the challenges and collaborate with each other. And that was all extremely valuable feedback. I know we're in the midst of some cohort meetings right now, so those have been great as well. We had a focus group and survey with the MVP 2.0 vendors where we got some really great feedback for those that have been assisting communities with the 2.0 process so far. We did surveys at the end of our Equity and Climate Justice Learning Series, which is part of our pilot process. And we also had regular check-ins between the regional coordinators and municipal leads. So the pilot round really helped inform a lot of changes to the program that we're really excited to roll out with this round. The first thing is that we'll be adding what we're calling an equity partner, which is somebody who's going to have a lot of expertise and skills in implementing climate justice and equity at the municipal level. So in addition to what we're now going to be calling the planning vendor that you hire to help you through the process, you'll also get an equity partner that will be hired through EEA. So you don't have to go through procurement or anything for them, and they can help support the process. And they also allow us to kind of decentralize the Equity and Climate Justice Learning Series, since that was a big logistical challenge for the pilot round. So the equity partner will take each municipality through those different learning series processes on their own time and at their own pace. We also are going to have more specific guidance on steps and roles. We heard loud and clear that that was needed. Folks really wanted very specific outline of what they should be doing in each step, or what a good example is of how to implement the step. So we will be providing more guidance on that to help folks out. We also will be more explicitly integrating support structures for different core team members. We'll be again, switching to a decentralized approach for the equity learning series. We're also going to be changing up the steps to alternate more of learning and doing instead of doing a lot of training up front and then doing the doing. So it takes a long time to get to that. We're going to kind of go back and forth a little bit more. We're going to be simplifying some of the content and tools and adjusting the terminology where needed. And more. So look out for all of those updates. Again, our website will be updated with those new materials at the beginning of next calendar year. So in terms of the process, I've sort of updated this graphic. If you have seen it before, if you haven't, I will go through this new process and you don't have to worry about what happened in the pilot round. But the MVP 2.0 process essentially has 3 different phases. So the first phase will be developing your core team of folks who are going to be doing this project with you. Phase two is around revisiting resilience priorities from your first planning grant process and doing really deep community engagement during this phase. And phase three, you will be implementing your seed project. And then at the end, leaving some time for reflection and adjusting for next steps. So for phase one, developing the core team, there's sort of three key players. So I'll go through each of those now. So first, I already mentioned this, but you will be assigned an equity partner to help with the process right from the start. They'll support the process and be a resource for the team in thinking about equity and climate justice. There will be a planning vendor. So with the help of the equity partner, the municipal lead will hire a planning vendor and they'll follow municipal procurement guidelines to get that planning vendor. Tools that we at EEA have to help you find a vendor. We'll have a list of qualifications as well as a sample RFP. And then we'll also, this is new for this round, have a list of vendors that have expressed interest in the MVP 2.0 process. That'll be a suggested list that you may use to help in finding a vendor, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides as well. Oops. There we go. So in terms of the planning vendor or vendor team, these are the different qualifications that we ask for you to look for in a planning vendor. So somebody that has equity-centered project facilitation, somebody who is well-versed in community-driven processes, and hopefully somebody who has some experience in climate and community resilience as well. But as I mentioned, there will be qualifications and an example RFP provided. So tasks of the planning vendor, I'm not going to go through all of these right now, just in the interest of time, but essentially they'll help you go through the grant and make sure that everything is being implemented, all the deliverables are being met and things like that. So things to keep in mind, the list of MVP certified providers from MVP 1.0 or the original planning grant is retired. That's no longer applicable to this program. Instead, we're going to have a vendor orientation in January 2025 for vendors that are interested in the 2.0 process, and vendors that attend that orientation will be added to a list along with their qualifications. To help select a planning vendor, communities will be provided with the list of vendors from the vendor orientation, as well as a sample RFP and a set of qualifications. Attending the orientation doesn't guarantee that a vendor is qualified. Communities should still vet any vendors on the list with the qualifications provided by going through the procurement process. In step 9, communities will hire an implementation vendor to help implement their seed project. This could be the same planning vendor, or it could be a new vendor with different expertise if that is needed for your seed project. All right, and then the third kind of piece here is the actual core team. So aside from hiring the planning vendor, steps 1 through 3 focus on recruiting the core team. The core team is a team of municipal staff and community members. Be roughly 10 people in total, but could vary depending on the size of the municipality. And this team is really who leads the project from the community. So extremely key players there. So who's on the core team? As I said, roughly 10 people, approximately half of them are going to be community liaisons. And community liaisons are individuals from or with strong connections to environmental justice or other priority populations in town. Priority populations are those who will be disproportionately impacted by climate change. So in addition to factors that contribute to environmental justice status, other factors like physical ability, access to transportation, health, and age can indicate whether someone will be disproportionately affected. So those are the types of folks that we would expect to be community liaisons. And those folks will be compensated through the grant funding for their time and their expertise. And then the other half of the core team is sort of the municipal staff and partners, as we're calling them. So individuals who work in planning, housing, public works, et cetera. All of those types of folks could be a good fit for that part of the core team. We have a bunch of resources for supporting core team recruitment in MVP 2.0. You'll be filling out what we call the social resilience roadmap, which we'll be editing a bit based on feedback from the pilot round, but it will help you find or think about what types of folks could be recruited for the community liaison portion of your core team. We also have our guides for equitable and actionable resilience, or GEAR tool, where you can investigate data. There's a whole section on a community guide where you can look at different demographics and things like that to figure out who lives in your town and who should be represented on your core team. So things to keep in mind, community liaisons can be paid directly by the municipality, or they can be paid through the contract with the planning vendor. If you plan to pay the community liaisons directly, consider working with your human resources department now to coordinate how this would be set up and to troubleshoot any issues before you would get the grant funding towards the beginning of next calendar year. Phase 2 is all about revisiting resilience priorities. So a lot of this has been reworked a little bit from the pilot process, if you are familiar with that. If not, no worries. So this is around 5 months of the process. The first part is around kind of kicking things off and getting to know each other and the core team, since you probably won't know everybody on the core team. So you'll be hosting a dinner and a movie night to watch the MVP 2.0 kickoff videos that go over the process and some other important information. And you'll also be getting to know each other and building skills for working together. Then you'll be diving into the uncovering social resilience part of the process. So you'll be investigating community and climate data, designing engagement activities and holding conversations with community members, and compiling information to understand what shapes vulnerability and resilience for people in your community. And finally, you'll be resetting your priorities. So you'll update your community resilience priorities from the original planning grant process based on what you've learned, and then you'll be vetting those updated priorities with the community. Lots of tools again for these steps. We've got the kickoff videos, an engagement plan that walks you through how to set up some good engagement in your community. We have the social resilience roadmap again, the GEAR tool, and also the resilience priorities guide, which will walk you through updating your priorities. You will also have facilitated discussions led by your equity partner. So this is what's sort of replacing the equity and climate justice learning series from the pilot process. Similar concepts to what were covered there. It's just going to be integrated through the process a little bit differently, and the equity partner is going to be doing this individually with each of the municipalities or regional groups that apply. So you'll be diving into what is lived expertise. You'll be looking at what inclusive engagement looks like in your community. And you'll also be looking at what are the root causes of social vulnerability and how it relates to climate equity. And finally, what are ways to measure and monitor the equity impacts of projects? So some really key questions there. All right, phase 3. So once you're finished with sort of the planning portion of the MVP 2.0 process and move on to a seed project. Again, you'll be receiving $50,000 to receive or to implement a seed project. That's based on what your updated priorities are. We've got a few of our pilot communities have gotten to this point, which has been really exciting. For example, I think South Hadley is working on enabling a affordable housing trust. So that was something that came out of their planning process. So yeah, excited to see what everybody is coming up with, and you'll have some good ideas from the pilot communities on what kinds of seed projects they're going to undertake. So you'll be selecting a seed project first. So you'll be identifying a few potential projects and then vetting those with the community. Then you'll be developing an implementation plan. So we have a whole worksheet through about this as well that will take you through developing the plan. It kind of mirrors the action grant process, so you can actually use this worksheet again when you're developing an action grant idea, which is also an exciting thing to use in that case as well. You'll be implementing your seed project, and then you'll be reflecting and discussing next steps. Bunch of resources for seed projects as well. There's gear, there's examples, and then we have the seed project plan, engagement plan, and reflection roadmap. We're also working with MAPC and PVPC on a resilience playbook right now that's going to have some example projects in it. So that'll be a good resource, and we think that'll come out around the spring. So in plenty of time for the seed project portion of the next round. All right, so once you have completed everything, these are all of the deliverables that we'll be looking for. I talked about a lot of these on the different slides already, but these are kind of the different worksheets, guides that you'll be filling out as you go through the process. And those serve as your deliverables. And the process guide outlines when to submit them and when to check in with your regional coordinator. All right, I'm going to take a sip of water and then dive into the application round and details. So this has a lot of administrative things on it, but essentially this next round, which again, we are expecting to release applications at the beginning of November. So in terms of eligibility and selection, we have municipalities, MVP eligible tribes, and political subdivisions like RPAs applying on behalf of municipality. Again, regional applications are encouraged. Municipalities on the next slide must apply to the MVP 2.0 program in order to maintain eligibility for action grants in the next round that's in the spring and beyond. So I'll flip to that slide in a minute so you can look at it with me. And then all other interested parties. So if you're not in that round, but you're a municipality that's interested in doing the 2.0 process now, you're welcome to apply and encouraged. We think we'll likely have several slots for non-required communities this round. So definitely put your hat in the ring for that. And we will include you if we can. In terms of funding and grant admin, you'll be receiving $50,000. That's bumped up a little bit from the pilot round because we heard a lot of feedback that we needed a bit more funding for some of the planning steps. So you'll be receiving $50,000 for those, and then $50,000 for implementing the seed project. It's a 2-year grant. We wanted to give folks time to develop relationships and implement the grant. So 1 year really did not seem like enough to do all of this. So that's a 2-year grant, and there is no formal match requirement. Timeline, so RFR would be released early November. We'll have a Q&A period where you can submit your questions to us. Applications expected to be due in December, with projects likely starting around February of 2025 and ending in December of 2026. And then you'll be submitting your applications through an online form. The link will be in the RFR. It'll be similar to last year, if you're familiar with that. And a few notes, applicants will still be able to apply for action grants at the same time that they are participating in 2.0. So you could apply for 2.0 now and then still do an action grant in the spring. MVP will take compliance with the MBTA Communities Act into account. I am waiting for some guidance from EEA and our legal office on exactly what this means. So we will be including more details about that in the RFR. So definitely look out for that when it comes out. So here's the map of communities that need to apply for 2.0 this round, all the ones in blue here. Hopefully you got a letter from us saying as such that you would need to apply. I will note that if you don't apply for the round that you've been assigned to, I wouldn't necessarily bank on just being able to apply next round. We're really only going to give priority to those that were assigned in that round. So you may have to wait several rounds if you don't do it this round when you've been assigned. So just wanted to put that out there. And then these light blue communities are all the ones that will be required to do it in the next round. So I just wanted to put this up there as well, and we'll distribute the slide deck afterwards so you can take a look. But if you wanted to apply this round, you're more than welcome if you're in the light blue, but you will be assigned for the next round, which we anticipate being next fall, so a year from now. In terms of the application, it's pretty straightforward. I'm hoping everyone can do it in 30 minutes or less. Really tried to make it very easy for folks. The biggest thing is really just getting a letter of commitment from the chief official. So start planning now for that, I guess. But other than that, just some easy, hopefully, questions that you can fill out about why your community is interested, description of EJ or other priority populations in your community, any challenges you face moving from planning to action, description of other ongoing grants, and any translation or interpretation needs that would go above and beyond the amount of grant funding that we'd be giving you. Other attachments to the RFR, there'll be an FAQ with some frequently asked questions, and then also a attachment about requesting a modified scope or designation as an MVP 2.0 community based on prior work. So if you feel like you've already done the steps that I just described, you can apply to us to get designation without going through the process. Okay, well, I think I kept my promise to keep that to about 30 minutes. So I will now open it up for any Q&A that has come in, and feel free to keep adding that to the Q&A function as well.
Great. I'm Marissa Robertson. I'm the Deputy Director of the MVP program, for those who don't know me. If some of the RCs can keep adding questions to our questions list, I'll go through now in the order that the questions have been coming in. So the first question is around eligibility. I think there might be a little bit of confusion with the planning grants and the action grants. So they're asking the RFP lists communities that must do MVP 2.0 and indicates they might get preference on grants. What about communities doing the MVP 2.0 pilot?
Got it. Okay. If I'm understanding correctly, which anybody else jump in, if you maybe this person that asked this question is in the pilot communities.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so if that's the case, then the pilot round counts for MVP 2.0. You don't need to do it again. That counts as the process. So you will be designated as a 2.0 community, and you won't need to redo it whenever your round comes up. Is there anything else there?
And I would just add that they will be eligible for action grants.
Yeah.
Also,
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, anybody in the pilot round is eligible for action grants anytime. So feel free.
The next question is around the kind of subject of 2.0. They're wondering if all MVP 2.0 initiatives, efforts, or items are climate related, which is a question we're also getting in the pilot round, going through and updating priorities.
All MVP 2.0 initiatives. Do we think that means the seed projects?
Well, with the pilot round, we've had some questions around priorities being maybe not at the surface level, seemingly climate related, and how does that translate into the 2.0 process and then action grants?
Got it. Okay. Well, I think you kind of just answered it by saying at the surface level, seeming climate related. But a lot of climate issues are extremely interdisciplinary, and some things that build, for example, social resilience that will be helpful in times of acute climate crisis, might not seem climate related on the surface, but really are. So really like building those relationships in your community and things like that. So I think just have an open communication with your RC if you're confused about any of that, but definitely think that a lot of priorities can be linked to the climate in some way. And if you are pursuing that through like an action grant and things like that, we can help you kind of make those connections to um, how it advances climate resilience.
The next question, small rural communities have unique needs. What considerations are given to those areas, and can we join with other towns to apply?
Yes, great questions. So yeah, definitely you can join with other towns to apply. We really encourage that. You can apply with your RPA or one of the communities can be the lead, depending on how you want to set that up. But that is definitely an option and something that we'd encourage. And we did have some smaller rural communities in our pilot round. So we've been collecting a lot of feedback from those communities as well. So you are represented in the feedback, and we tried to really take smaller communities into consideration when building out the process.
We've had several questions around cost. This one's kind of specific, but maybe you want to speak just to the overall kind of breakdown of how the grant works. But they're wondering what the cost range for a planning vendor for phase one for a small town would be. So maybe talking a little bit about how like the population size doesn't correlate to the grant
Got it.
amount.
Yeah. So all communities are getting the same amount through MVP 2.0. So it doesn't change depending on the size of the community. The steps of the process related to planning get $50,000, and that gets distributed among the planning vendor as well as compensating those community liaisons on the core team or anybody that's not sort of a salaried municipal employee. So all of that gets accounted for as well as the different engagement that needs to happen and a few other kind of direct costs as well. And then the $50,000 for the seed project is separate. Um, and you don't have to worry about the equity partner at all. EEA is going to be contracting with them separately and paying them separately.
Great. The next question, is it required that we review the MVP 1.0 plan during this process? It would be easier in our community to start from scratch if we want to make sure to find unexplored areas.
Great question. I would say it'd be good to at least revisit it a little bit during the revisiting resilience priorities, see if there's anything that still makes sense. But really, you are going to be like doing a whole new investigation with the community about what their needs are. So definitely like the whole process isn't really grounded necessarily in the 1.0 process and what those priorities were. You'll just do kind of like a cross check later on. But Holly, did you have anything else maybe to add about that?
No, I think you hit it well. There are, as Kara mentioned, there are kind of processes and tools to dive into the process and ask a bunch of different questions and explore that first. And then, as Kara mentioned, you kind of go back to 1.0 and say, okay, now that we know this much more information, how do these other priorities, which ones are still resonating, which ones need updating, and which ones may no longer feel as important. And so it allows for that cross check, but it isn't necessarily centered on those. So I think.
Great, thank you.
It looks like there's multiple questions about the equity partners, which I know you just spoke to a little bit. Will EEA be hiring one equity partner for the entire state or an equity partner per region? Will there be a state procurement process for the equity partner vendors?
Yes, 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 yes. No. So we are planning, so we're actually going through the procurement process now. So we'll have these folks on board hopefully by the beginning of next year, definitely before everybody starts with the new process. We're anticipating hiring about 5 equity partners. So they will be distributed among the communities for the next round. Probably they'll have about 6 communities in their purview. Um, I think that answers all the questions.
Great. I'm seeing multiple questions about specific towns wanting to know their dedicated year. We will be posting the slides in this recording after the webinar.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's safe to say that if you don't see yourself on this upcoming list or the map for that includes FY26 to reach out to your RC
Yeah.
with specific questions.
Yeah, I think that's right. And this, just to, I don't think I said this earlier, but put a finer point on who's required this round. It's because those are the communities that have had that finished their MVP 1.0 process, and their plan is dated May 2018 or earlier. So they're really the oldest plans at this point. So we're rolling it out in terms of when your plan was updated. Um, and so the rest of the folks that finished in 2018 after May will be the next round. And then 2019, 20, and so on and so forth. But we're trying to keep it manageable. So we have about 30 communities in each round for now. Um, Possibly we may expand that if we feel like everything's going smoothly. But right now we just really want to make sure that we have a number of communities that we can really support through the process.
I think this next question is a really good one. Please give a definition of community. For example, is this a neighboring town or city that uses our resources, and would they be considered part of our community?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think if there are folks um, that participate in your community that don't aren't necessarily residents, but for example, I think it's come up a lot that maybe if folks work in your community rather than live there, those are definitely fair game for and should be included in your planning process to some extent because they are interacting in your municipality.
And I also think that's a great opportunity for potential regional projects as well, if
Oh
you're
yeah, for
sharing a
sure.
lot of resources with a neighboring community.
Yeah, that's true. It would be great to go in together. And you don't have you could go in with a few communities that aren't required this round as well, if you want to, if there's one that is, and then a few others. Um, so even if you don't see them on the map, doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity to do a regional grant with them.
Another equity partner question, will the equity partner be involved through the whole process or only through phase 1 and 2?
Good question. Yeah, so the equity partner is mainly going to be involved in the planning part of the process and not as much with the implementation part. I think if there are specific questions or, sorry, the seed project part, if there are specific questions or needs, we can kind of talk through that, but really seeing them as supporting the planning part of the process.
Great. Um, Maybe talking a little bit about how this overlaps with the action grant. So the current MVP 2.0 communities, will they be given priority for action grant? How does this process interact with the action grant process generally?
Good question. So the main way that it interacts with the action grant process is that you have to do the 2.0 process when you're assigned, or else you're not going to remain eligible for action grants. So that's kind of the big interaction. But we do hope that various parts of the 2.0 process are really going to make the community more competitive for action grants and really kind of think through the lens of the MVP core principles, put together an actionable project, and then be able to kind of reiterate that when they're applying for future action grants as well. So we're trying to kind of set folks up for success in future parts of the program as well.
A timeline question. Will timelines be flexible, similar to the pilot round? Some communities have had difficulty adhering to the original timeline.
Yeah, so we definitely want to give folks the opportunity to, um, take the time that they need to develop the relationships. We know that that doesn't always happen quickly. That being said, we do need to have some amount of time to put bounds around the grant, just in terms of making sure folks actually finish it and things like that. So that's kind of how we hit on the 2-year process, and we'd encourage folks to try to meet that. But if you're running into issues, definitely just reach out to our team, and we're happy to help troubleshoot.
There's several questions around if they're not a required community this round but want to apply,
Hmm.
whether they should apply,
Hmm.
and maybe speak a little bit to when they're most competitive, if that makes
Great
sense.
question. So yeah, this is a bit of a nuance, so I appreciate somebody asking that. So the communities are that are on that map basically are the ones that are going to be prioritized. So um, what that means basically is that any of those communities that apply, I think should assume that they will get a grant to do the 2.0 process this round. Um, like I said, I would assume that there will be some slots available. I don't know how many yet. It really depends on how many of the um, required communities apply and how much funding we have and all of that. So that's why I think definitely if you're interested, you might as well apply. And we'll see if how many we can incorporate into this round. The application, as I mentioned, really isn't a heavy lift. So I think if you're at all interested, go ahead and apply. And all of those communities that aren't required will kind of just use our scoring criteria to figure out who we can accommodate this round. But yeah, after that, I think you might as well just apply and see what happens.
Um, can communities stack seed projects with action grants? Can we stack seed projects with other grant programs, or is the intention to keep those seed projects more limited in scope?
Great question. I've been talking a lot. Does anybody else want to chime in here?
I answered that one in the chat box, but I
Okay,
think the main thing is to have an open mind. We're encouraging communities to not have any preconceived notion about what the seed project's going to be, to let phase one, phase two unfold, and then to select a project that reflects what you learn about your community through the deep outreach engagement work that's going to unfold. Because it could be something entirely new and entirely different, and you might think, I wasn't expecting this, which is kind of what we've seen so far. Out here in this region with South Hadley for their work in going towards a housing avenue. That was very unexpected. To use their own words, they weren't expecting to work on that.
awesome. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, and I would also just add that the seed project is intended to be something that's manageable to implement. So there was a question about the scope.
Hmm.
Um, it should be obviously related to the priorities that you are discovering and redefining. Um, but it should also be a project that you feel like your community can kind of implement together, if that makes sense. There is a question about when the date of the RFR release will be.
Good question. Hopefully as early in November as we can get it posted.
Do municipalities need to decide who their planning vendor is at the time they apply?
No. In fact, you shouldn't know who your planning vendor is at the time that you apply. Um, yeah, no, the first parts of the process are really designed to help you find a planning vendor. And I think I discussed that at the beginning, all the different resources and things that we'll have available to help with that. Um, I should note that we are still hoping that the planning vendors meet the same qualifications as the pilot round. Um, Even with the addition of the equity partner, we still want the planning vendor to really have that knowledge and skills in equity work and in community engagement as much as possible.
And then there have been several questions about the regional process that I think we should cover.
Mhm.
Um, so in considering doing an individual versus regional project, are there any challenges or pitfalls that we have discovered? And or is there an advantage to collaborating with another town at the planning level for this
Mhm.
process?
Great questions. Any of the RCs have thoughts about that based on the pilot process?
I feel like the pilot's been going along for the regional group. There's 4 communities right now, just as well as it's been going for everyone else. I think there's some discussion to be had about the size of the core team, but this particular group is really focused around a sub-watershed. You don't have to be focused around a physical area. It could be just maybe you share, you know, different areas of town or different resources, and it would be beneficial to get together.
Thanks, Hillary. And I should also note, I don't think I mentioned this in that presentation, but each community that's part of the regional group gets 50,000 for the seed project. So that might be a nice thing to do together if you're interested in doing sort of a regional project or a bigger scale project. It might be advantageous to go the regional route. Um, and we also are going to give a little boost in funding for the planning as well, since we know that takes a bit more coordination to do a regional project than a single municipality. So you'll be getting additional funding from us for regional projects.
Great. And the next question, I asked that, and then also wanted to know, and you might have just said this about the seed project,
Yeah.
if each community receives additional or
Yep.
their own
Yeah,
funding
each
for that.
each community gets the 50,000 for the seed project. So you'll add it together for the regional one.
If a regional watershed-based partnership would suit a set of towns very well, but one of the towns went through the 1.0 process relatively recently, would
Mhm.
that count against them in their application?
No, I don't think that would count against them. As long as, one or more are part of the required communities, definitely would encourage going through it together.
Great. Let's see here. There is a question about the intention of this process. So, what specific kinds of situations are projects intended to build resilience to? Since climate change could lead to a lot of things such as bigger storms, food shortages, etc.
All of that. Yes, all of that is correct. So I think this process is really designed to think through lots of different challenges as it relates to climate. But more than that is really hearing from the community and in particular those groups that are really on the front lines of climate change about what matters to them, what they need to be prepared for any kind of climate impact. And so I think you'll be kind of diving into these topics more depending on what your community is interested in. Through this process.
Great. There's several questions about funding and payments, um, especially around like community liaisons.
Mhm.
Something I want to flag is that we're going to have some resources and case studies and things that we've learned from the pilot round about paying community liaisons, how much to pay them, etc. Um, so it seems like there's like some very specific questions around that, but that will be addressed in the resources that are provided through the process.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for pointing that out, Marissa. And I mean, if you have other specific situations, feel free to reach out to your regional coordinator and we can help to the extent that we can.
There's a question about determining And this is something we're getting in the pilot round as well. So when you revisit and redetermine your priorities, how do you know which ones should be prioritized and addressed? Probably through an action grant application.
Got it. Yes. I mean, I think that really comes through the community engagement piece, and really learning from the community which ones are priorities for them. But Holly, if you're still there, do you have more thoughts about that one as well?
Yeah, hi. My internet is being a little bit wonky, so let me know if you can't hear me well.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it'll be what's coming out loud and clear through the community conversations. And ultimately, I think it's going to be something where it won't be a perfect or clear picture. It may be something where it's like, okay, these four things are all things that we want to address. And we have kind of a concept that there's a lot of community momentum around for moving forward with this seed project. So maybe we move forward with this idea for now, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the others aren't priorities and that future action grants can be targeted towards those. So it's elevating what you're hearing and really through those conversations, kind of acknowledging these are feeling like top priorities based on what we're hearing.
Like,
A question around community liaisons. How do we select community liaisons? Is it just anyone that is interested, or do they need to have specific qualifications?
Holly, I'm going to let you take that one too.
Yeah, so there's kind of a sample job description that we've put together that helps kind of sketch out the different qualifications that we're thinking about with when talking about community liaisons. And one of the areas that we specifically talk about is the concept of lived expertise. And related to that so let me back up. Looking for folks specifically who live in the community, who have live or work in the community, who have strong existing connections with environmental justice communities or other priority populations. And that's defined in a lot more detail within the materials, but really just folks that'll be most impacted by climate change. So whether that's based on age, whether that's based on income, et cetera. And so it's looking for folks that in their day-to-day, whether it's through their line of work or whether or not they're just kind of a mover and shaker in a particular neighborhood and are willing to be that spokesperson for others in the community to say, this is what I'm hearing, this is how I think we can best get the word out about this engagement event, et cetera. So a little bit of what we're looking for is that kind of qualification of someone who's like looking to be kind of a community organizer and who can play that connective tissue role. And then other aspects that make a great community liaison is someone who can speak to particular areas of lived expertise or have connections to folks who could speak to lived expertise. And that may be some experience with housing insecurity. It may be experience with food insecurity. It may be living in a particular neighborhood that floods quite a bit. But there is a process to guide you through thinking about who in your community might be most impacted by climate change. And that helps dictate what sort of qualifications and lived expertise you're looking for on your core team.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. Great.
Do you want to do maybe one more question?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more, and then we'll just ask folks to follow up with us for any additional questions.
Are there any, and this is a question we've been getting quite a lot, so I feel like this one we should answer live. Are any pilot 2.0 communities going through their HMP updates while also doing the 2.0 process?
Great question. I'm going to pass that over to the RCs. Anybody know that?
There are none doing that.
Okay. There are none doing that then. The processes are quite different, but I think a lot of the MVP 2.0 steps would enhance an HMP process in terms of community input and engagement and things like that. So if that's something that you're doing, I'm happy to talk further about that.
Yes, and just to add to that, I know there are some HMP engagement requirements that some towns had thought about using their 2.0 engagement to count towards also those HMP engagement requirements. So that's where there might be a little bit of overlap.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Great. I think we got through most of the questions.
All right. Well, again, if we didn't get to your question, just send your RC or one of the admin staff an email, and happy to follow up on that. And otherwise, we really look forward to seeing your applications starting in November, and we'll send out to the listserv when we post the grant opportunity. And really, really appreciate your time today. And we'll post the slides as well as the recording to our website as well. So thank you all so much.